Hello, fellow Bubble developers. Nikolai Markovich from Echolaketech, echolaketech.com. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a countdown counter that can be used for auction applications. Before I jump into the demo, though, please give me a thumbs up if you like these type of videos, and also subscribe to my channel. I greatly appreciate that. Okay, let me do a demo here. So we'll do an auction that's just over a day away, 10 a.m. for tomorrow, and we'll get that going. Okay, so auction number 1 here, and it's gonna expire or end in 24 hours, 17 minutes, and 10 seconds. So let's get into the design for this. All right, so for this we have this date and time picker. So for that, you come down here to date and time picker and just simply add that in. And on this, you want date and time, so the default is just date, so you pick date and time. And then you can also change the format of it as well. So play around with it, some of these other variables to see how you want to stylize it for your own. The one thing that I did add on here is the minimum date, so that basically, so come down here and scroll all the way to the bottom to current time and date. The reason for that is that to prevent people from starting a auction before the current time. So that's that element. And then I have a simple input element here. So up at the scrolled past it already, input. So for input here, and then this one is of type text, so basically all the same defaults, nothing's really changed here. I do have it so that the enter key, you can't use the enter key. It forces the user to click the start button here, which I'll get to in a moment, and that the input should also not be empty. So from the default input, just simply click the button here, and input should not be empty. And that's it for the input button, input field. And then the start button here, so start button, just simply add that in there. And then let me get to the workflow. So start edit workflow. Okay, so for this workflow here, the first thing we're going to do is create a new auction. I'm going to jump over to the data tab here and go to the data types so you can see the structure of the auction. So the name is auction. If you're not familiar how to create that, so you just come down here and type in and then create. So for this one it was auction. And then in here I have auction name. So that is basically this auction 1 field name. And then the auction type. So in this video, this is going to be for a to pick a time in the future. I'm going to create some other videos that have different auction types that are countdown from an hour, for a day, and so forth. So in here I have different auction types. The duration, so this is going to be a calculation for how long the auction is going to last for, the end time, and then the start time. And you can see on here that the end time is of type date. So when you're creating it for yourself, basically the name, and then you've got date for that. Okay, so that's basically all there is to the data field here. For your application, you might have some additional fields that you need. And I'm going to jump back to the workflow here. So create a new auction, and in here we have the end type, and that's the day time picker value. So just to jump back over here, so that's this element here. And then we have the duration, so this is going to be a calculated value, and it's basically taking that input for the daytime picker and then taking subtracting the current date and time, and then formatting it as seconds. And the reason it's formatted as seconds is in a few minutes I'll get to this more complicated algorithm for calculating all of the all of the hours, minutes, and seconds, which is fairly complicated to put in here, but I'll show you and walk you through that in a few moments. But we do need it to be as seconds. Auction name, so that's the input field here, this input field. And then the auction type, as I was mentioning, I have different types of auctions. So this one I was just calling it the end date type of auction. And then the start or end time. So this one is also a text, and it's start. And then I do have end, and I'll walk through that in a few moments as well, because when the auction gets to the end, I have a conditional that has some text that says the auction has ended. So let me just kind of quickly go through some of this so you can see how it's done. So I can type in date, time picker, value. So that's how I get the end time. Then I can come over here and just for duration. So again, it's that date picker's value, and then you see this search here. So I scroll down, you'll get this more, and then go down here to the minus sign, and then in here current date and time. So that's down at the bottom here, current date and time, and then format as seconds. So if it doesn't automatically come up, you'll get the red text here. You'll see the more, and then format as seconds. And that's how you get duration, auction name, and this one is just I'm going to type in input, auction name, and I'll delete the rest of this stuff because Bubble had it from the prior input value. There we go. All right, so auction name and then auction type. As I was mentioning, this is just typed in. One thing to be aware of for with Bubble, that end date all lowercase here. If I put in a capital D on here, that is a different value to Bubble. So just be careful when you have values that are typed in that you're consistent with them, because Bubble does look at the cases of them as different values. Start and end time. Similarly for this one, start and end time, this is just a typed in field. And again, start with a capital S. Make sure you're consistent, because that's these are two different values to Bubble. All right, so that's how you do the create a new auction. Add a pause. So the reason why I have this add a pause in here is because when I was going through creating this video, I noticed that when Bubble is doing its refresh and creating the date, or rather the hours, the minutes, and seconds, that there is some data that's within the algorithm, so it wasn't aesthetically looking very good. So I put this 1 second delay, and 1000 represents 1 second, as this number here is in milliseconds. And then what I have here is a set state, and this is where really some of the complexity comes in on setting up these countdown counters. So the state here, I've got 3 of them, a group auction. So that's the group, and let me just jump over here. So I have this group auction, and within it I have this custom state, or rather multiple custom states. The auction name, end time, start or end, and update counter. And the reason why I need all of these is because when you create an auction, and then you close your browser or the application, and then you come back, I'll show you in a moment that I'm restoring data for this auction onto the page and into the custom state here, so that the app doesn't lose track of the auction. And I'll walk through that in a few more moments. So if you're not familiar with custom states, so basically you just create one and the different types of states that you want, and that's how I created these. Now I'm gonna also just comment here that I did it at the group auction. Now any element can have a custom state. okay? And it's important that you do this at the group auction state, okay? And I'll get to a reason why in a little bit once we get to the workflow for doing the countdown clock, or actually the seconds. Okay, so on this we have the set state end time for the group auction. We have the end time, and the end time is simply just going to take the value from the auction when we created it here. So resolve from step 1, end time. I could have just as easily gone and taken the date picker A's value, but just for convenience, I guess I just picked this one. And then the auction name, similarly, I just took the resolve from step 1, the auction name. Again, I could have taken the input from this input field here. And then custom state, start or end, and then the value is start. So this is basically saying that the auction has started. And then I do a reset on all of the inputs. So basically I reset these inputs here. Now let me just walk through this if you're not familiar. So creating a new thing, so under data, create a new thing, and then it's auction. And then I just simply go through the fields, input, auction name, value, like that, and so on and so forth. And I just go through and fill out those fields. I don't think there's anything super tricky about these. Yeah, no, I think those are pretty straightforward. Now for the adding a pause. So that one, let me scroll up here. Under navigation, add a pause before next action. Default is 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second, so no changes there. Delete that. Set state. Okay, so set state, that is under element actions. And then, where is my set state? Right there, set state. And then I go through, and for this one, again, it's group auction, the custom state, so auction name. Let me just go back here to make sure I get all the right ones that I said earlier. So auction name, and then for the value, results from step 1, auction name. And then in here I had end time. So for set another state, end time, and then for this one, the result from step 1, end time, and so forth. So that's how you set up the state here in the workflow. So I'm just going to delete that. And then lastly, reset relevant inputs. Again, element actions, reset inputs, just like that. And that's the workflow here for creating the auction. Now, I'm going to jump over here to when page is loaded. So when page is loaded, as I was mentioning earlier, that we want to, when we refresh the page, if we've gone away, close the app, and then we come back, we want to make sure that for a multi-day auction that the auction continues on the page. So if I come back over here, I want to make sure that the auction is still going. So now we're at 24 hours, 4 minutes, so it continues to count down. And this happens for with this page loaded. So on the page loaded, what I have here is I have a set state, similar to the one we just walked through. So when the page is loaded, I go to this group auction state, and it's the same one that we were just looking at here. And I basically go and I take the values that are stored in Bubble's database and I copy it to each one of these custom states, end time, auction time, and start or end time. So let me just walk through that with you. So let's pick start or end time. And then for that one, it's search for auctions. So I'm going to search into the database. And then on that, I'm going to look at who created the auction, so current user, and then what's the auction type. So for this particular auction, I'm calling it N type, And I'm just going to jump over, and I will have videos for other types. So this one here, the auction type is hours. So I will have another video for that one. So search auctions, end type, and then each item's end, start or end, and then the last item. And the reason for that is because for this view here, I'm picking the latest and greatest auction. So there could be multiple auctions going on in your application, and in this example here, I'm just taking the last one that was created. So do a search for auction, and then here I'm adding the constraints. So created by current user, and then auction type equals, and I'm just going to double check here so I don't type it incorrectly, end type. Okay, so you see I clicked on the click here and it didn't take. So Bubble is a little bit finicky with some of these inputs. So I moved my cursor to the left a little bit. You can see how the cursor changed. So the icon changed. So I forgot what I called it here, end type. End type. Okay, and then you can see that Bubble is looking for more information. All right, so first item. Actually, I picked the last item. And start or end. Okay. And that's how you set up this custom state, by doing the search. And again, what this is going to do is it's going to be taking the last auction that I created into the database, and then it's going to be taking those values for the end time, auction name, and start name, and it's going to be adding those to the custom states. And the reason for that is those custom states, and now I'm going to jump over to here to do every 1 second. And for this, I am going to go and update this other custom state, update counter, with a current date and time. So basically every second the browser, the app, is going to update the counter. So this is how you get the 1 second decrements. It's by this command here, do every 1 second. Now I have this only when in here, and the reason for it is I don't want the counter to keep going once the auction is over. So basically I have this end time of the auction, and then I have the update counter formatted as seconds if that's greater than 0, so the difference between the two, and the group actions start value is start, so those two conditions have to be true. The difference between the end time and the amount of time left on the auction has to be greater than 0. And I also have to, the auction still has to be at start. Then this countdown will continue to do its thing. So that's how you set it up. And let me show you again, set state, element actions, set state. The element was group auction, and on here update counter, and then the value for it is going to be just simply the current date and time. Current date and time. And that's how you set that up. Now for doing every 1 second, it's an event. So actually, here's page loaded. So over here, page loaded. So general, page is loaded. So that's how you get that one. And then do every second. So every second, right here. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one on my screen. So every 5 seconds, and just change that to 1 second. So it's actually, just to be clear, it's general to every 5 seconds, but then when that comes up, just simply change this to every 1 second, and that's how you get the app to go and do the 1 second countdown. Or I should say do the increment every 1 second. Alright, so that's the two workflows here as part of start and loading the page. Now I'm going to move over to the group here. So I've talked a little bit about it already. So group is simply over here under containers, group. And then for it, I did some background color changes for it. Let me just copy this real quick and go over here. So flat color, and I just changed it to that. You can change it to whatever color you would like. The other thing on here, as I mentioned earlier, is that we do have some custom states. So over here, it's simply coming over, and you see there's no custom states. So I'm just going to say temp custom state like that, and then call it of type text, and that's how you get the custom state in for that group. Okay, so we've got the group set up, and that's all there really is for setting up the group. Now this is a bit more complicated. So I've got this text field, and in this text field I'm gonna jump back and forth between this view and the rich text editor view because it's a bit busy for this text field. So I've got this group auctions remaining, auction name, time remaining. So that basically is the auction name and then time remaining. So group auctions, auction name. I'm going to cancel out of this, and you can see group auctions, auction name. So that's basically the auction from the database, the name of this particular auction. And then I have this time remaining. Again, it's kind of hard to see in this view, time remaining. So if I go over here, you can see time remaining. Now over here, the rest of this, aesthetically, I kept all of the dynamic values in blue, and then hours in minutes and seconds you can see are in black. So let's walk through this. Again, this is a little bit tricky setting this up, which is why I create these videos for you all to make it easier for you to less time figuring it out. So we've got group auction. So again, this group here, end time minus the group auctions update counter formatted as seconds. Then we divide by 60, and then another divide by 60. And then we do this modulo, which means the remainder for a division, by 120 minus 0.5 rounded to 0. So again, kind of complicated, kind of busy here, but what this does is this is going to calculate the number of hours remaining. Now, a couple of things on here, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details on it, but you see here that you may ask, well, why didn't I do a divide by 360? Interestingly, with the way Bubble does its math, its algorithms, that if you do a divide by 360, that the calculation doesn't come out correctly. So you really want to do the divide by 60, and then another divide by 60, and then the modulo 120. And then that'll get you your hours. And then similarly, you have group auctions end time, same as up here, minus group auctions update counter, formatted as seconds, same thing as up here. And then this time it's only a divide by 60, and then the modulo 60, the 0 minus 0.5 rounded to 0. And that will get you to the minute calculation here. And then similarly for the seconds, group auctions end time, group auctions update counter, formatted as seconds, modulo 60. And that gets you your seconds. So let's go through this. This is pretty tricky. I'm going to pick the toughest one here because it's the longest. Group auction end time, and you get the more here. We'll scroll down to minus, and then it's going to be group actions update. So I'm going to type in group auctions update counter. And just real quick, I'm going to jump back to the workflow as a reminder. So this is where that update counter in the group, that custom state, is getting incremented every second. And then you get the more here. And then we're going to format as seconds. And you get this other more divided by 60. Actually, so this is again one of the things with Bubble. So I can't type in the divide symbol. I have to do divide, and then type in 60. And I'm just going to click down here to get the next more, and then I'm going to scroll down, and then type in 60 again, and I get the more, and then I go down to modulo. And then I type in 120, and then I'm just going to click down here to get the next more, scroll down, minus, and I'm going to type in 0.5, I get the more, and then I get the scroll down, rounded to, and then 0. And that's how you get it. I would suggest playing around with this. Get familiar with the Bubble editor here, because it is a little sensitive when typing some of this information in. So I suspect it might take you a couple of times to get through this, but keep at it. Keep referring to the video here. This is arguably the most complicated part of setting up the countdown clock, is to get this set up correctly. I'm not going to go through the rest of these, as I think, again, this was the most complicated, and that should hopefully make sense to you. If not, certainly reach out with questions in the comments and so forth. I do have a conditional in here, so that when the group auctions start or end is end, then I go and I'm going to jump to the rich text editor, so auction is over. Now in this example here, we've got another almost 24 hours still, so we're not going to wait until that shows up. I will create, again, some other videos that go through these other ones. So we got a 1 minute. No, I got to refresh the page before I can do that. So I've got a 1 minute duration. I've got, or I should say, a minute duration, hours, and days. And I'll be going through those videos or those designs in an upcoming video. Let me just jump back here because there's another part of the workflow that is important. I also want to comment, you see how I'm using these color codes here, or the coloring. So the pinks or purples, they go together, the blues go together, the greens go together, and so forth. And if you're not familiar with changing the colors, it's simply you click on the workflow and then you just change the color to what you would like. Okay, so for this one, do this action every time this occurs. And basically what I have here is the group auctions end time minus the group auctions update counter, formatted as seconds, is less than 0. So if you recall from over here, it's greater than 0. So over here it's when it's less than or equal to 0. And the group auction start or end is start, the value is start. I want to go and execute this workflow step. And the workflow step is simply the group auction, start or end, it's end. And what this will basically do, back to the text field, is this will be looking for the conditional in the text when the value is end. Then I go and change the text to auction is over. And if you're not familiar with this, let me just quickly, this is kind of again another great feature with Bubble. The group auction, let me move over here. start or end is end. Then I can go and select one of these properties to change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text and just type end. Oops, there we go. Let me go to Rich Text Editor. Again, as you get more familiar with Bubble, you see some of these little tricks. Sometimes it's easier just to go to the text editor instead of just typing it in the field here. So that's how you set up this conditional. And let me jump back over to workflow here. And to add this event, element do when condition is true. And you see just once, or do every time. So do it every time. And it's going to be, again, the group, auction, end time. I have to go back and refer to end time. End time. Minus, and got to refer, update, group, update counter, group. So you can see on here, again, I have all these different groups, and I'll get it into the details in subsequent video. So I've got these different groups. So each one of these groups has their own counter. So it's important that you do assign the update counter, format as seconds, for each one of these groups, because you can't use the same countdown counter for each one of the for all of these groups. They each have their, because each one of these are starting at a different time and so forth. Okay, and let's go back to is less than or equal to, so more, less than or equal to 0. And then I get this more, and when it is the group auction, group auctions, start or end is, and I type in start. Like that. Okay, so that is how you set up this event. And then set state. So you've seen this earlier in the video. So element action, set state. And for this one, it is just the start or end, and we're changing that to end. Custom state, start or end, and then the value end. And that's it. So at this point, we've walked through how to set up the countdown counter clock here. And now you have the ability to go and create your own countdown counter. And you can pick whatever, future date, or allow your users to pick out future countdown dates. And this one will end in 72 hours, 44 minutes, and 22 seconds. Again, if you like these type of videos, please give me a thumbs up. I appreciate that, and please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for staying to the end here. This was a rather detailed and complicated setup for this design. Thank you again.